Yes, it was definitely a setup. It was a blind date.
It was a blind date,
and,
for sure.
and it's so interesting because we talk about it now, and even then, because I'm from the States, you don't grow up with the same understanding of the royal family, and so while I now understand very clearly there's a global interest there, I didn't know much about him, and so the only thing that I had asked her when she said she wanted to set us up was, I had one question. I said, well, is he nice?
Princess Anne just did the unthinkable. She leaked DNA results that will destroy Meghan Markle forever. What she exposed is so shocking, the palace is in absolute meltdown. Charles is blindsided. William is livid. Harry's world is crumbling. The secret Meghan fought with everything to hide. This isn't just a scandal, this is the end of Meghan's carefully crafted story.
Good question. We've been very lucky. My mother was the Queen for a very long time. And although you kind of know that this might happen, you don't really think about it very much. Not least of all because the monarchy is about continuity. But I think for my brother, this is something he's been waiting for.
The monarchy will never be the same. You need to hear what Anne found before this gets taken down. According to multiple sources close to the palace, the leak began with an encrypted file sent to a carefully selected journalist known for handling sensitive material with discretion. The attachment contained medical documentation that had been processed through channels so secretive that even senior palace administrators remained unaware of its existence. Within hours of that first transmission, editorial teams across London were scrambling to verify what appeared almost too explosive to be genuine. The documents carried digital signatures and security markers that could only have originated from within the palace's most restricted server systems. When forensic analysis confirmed the authenticity, newsrooms fell into stunned silence before erupting into controlled chaos. Princess Anne had always represented something particular within the royal family structure. Unlike her brothers, she had never sought the spotlight or courted public adoration. Her work focused on charity engagements and official duties, carried out with a professionalism that bordered on the mechanical. Royal commentators frequently described her as the hardest working member of the family, someone who understood that service meant showing up regardless of personal feelings or public interest. This made her actions all the more startling. When someone known for absolute discretion suddenly breaks that pattern, the contrast demands attention. The substance of what Anne revealed struck at questions that had circulated in whispered conversations for years. These weren't new concerns, but they had remained firmly in the realm of speculation and rumour. What Anne's leak accomplished was dragging those questions into harsh daylight, forcing conversations that palace officials had worked tirelessly to avoid. The documentation pointed to issues surrounding paternity and bloodline verification, topics that carry enormous weight within an institution built entirely upon hereditary succession. In simpler terms, if questions exist about whether certain individuals genuinely belong within the direct line of royal descent, the entire foundation of monarchical legitimacy begins to wobble. Inside Buckingham Palace, the immediate response bordered on pandemonium. King Charles, who had spent his entire life preparing for the role he now held, found himself facing a crisis unlike any his mother had navigated during her lengthy reign. According to staff members who were present during those first hours, Charles demanded immediate answers about how such a breach could have occurred. The security implications alone were staggering. If Anne had accessed restricted files and transmitted them outside palace systems, what did that say about the vulnerability of other sensitive information? Beyond the technical concerns, Charles faced something more painful. This wasn't an external attack or a tabloid invention. The threat came from within his own family, from his own sister. Prince William's reaction reportedly combined shock with a grim kind of resignation. Those who know him well suggest he had anticipated some form of confrontation over these issues eventually, though perhaps not in such a dramatic fashion. William has long positioned himself as a guardian of institutional stability, someone deeply committed to preserving the monarchy for future generations. The leak represented everything he had tried to prevent, a public spectacle that would inevitably damage the crown's carefully maintained dignity. Senior palace aides observed William moving through those first days with visible tension, holding urgent consultations with advisors while trying to maintain some appearance of normalcy during public engagements. The response from Meghan Markle's circle demonstrated the severity of what had just occurred. Within hours, lawyers were activated, public relations specialists convened emergency strategy sessions, and a coordinated effort began to frame the leak as a vicious attack motivated by prejudice and institutional cruelty. Statements emphasized privacy violations and the protection of children who had no say in their circumstances. The messaging sought to shift focus away from the content of the leaked materials toward the ethics of their release. This approach made strategic sense from a defensive standpoint, though it did little to address the underlying questions now demanding answers. What made Anne's decision particularly striking was its apparent premeditation. This wasn't an impulsive act or a moment of poor judgment. Multiple sources suggest Anne had contemplated this step for months, weighing the personal and institutional costs against what she viewed as an obligation to historical truth. Friends close to the Princess Royal described her as increasingly troubled by what she perceived as dangerous compromises being made in the name of modernization. Anne belongs to a generation that views the monarchy through a particular lens, one that emphasizes continuity, tradition, and the sacred nature of bloodline succession. From her perspective, allowing uncertainty to persist around these fundamental questions represented an existential threat greater than any temporary scandal. The timing of Anne's revelation also deserves examination. It came during a period when tensions within the royal family had already reached uncomfortable levels. The departure of Harry and Meghan to California, their subsequent media appearances, and the ongoing debates about racism and institutional rigidity had created fault lines that showed no signs of healing. Palace insiders suggest that Anne had watched these developments with growing alarm, viewing them as symptoms of a deeper problem. In her assessment, the family had become so focused on managing public perception and avoiding controversy that it had lost sight of core principles. The DNA question represented a breaking point where silence became complicated. Understanding why someone like Anne would take such a dramatic step requires looking at her personal history within the family structure. As the only daughter of Queen Elizabeth, Anne occupied a unique position. She witnessed firsthand how her mother navigated decades of social change while maintaining institutional integrity. Elizabeth's approach combined necessary adaptation with firm boundaries about what could and couldn't be compromised. Anne appears to have absorbed these lessons deeply, developing a worldview that distinguishes between superficial modernization and fundamental transformation. When faced with what she interpreted as a threat to succession legitimacy, Anne seems to have concluded that her mother would have wanted the truth revealed, regardless of short-term damage. The leaked documents themselves raised questions that struck at the heart of royal protocol. In a system where titles, privileges, and even financial support flow from confirmed bloodlines, any ambiguity about paternity creates cascading complications. The materials Anne released reportedly contained genetic analysis conducted through channels designed to ensure absolute accuracy while maintaining secrecy. The testing had been commissioned by individuals concerned about verifying relationships that had been publicly presented as fact but never officially confirmed through the kind of documentation the palace typically maintains for succession purposes. According to informed sources, the specific concerns centered on the children of Harry and Meghan. Archie and Lilibet had been born in unusual circumstances for royals, far from traditional locations and outside standard protocols. While this alone wouldn't necessarily raise questions, combined with other factors, it had generated quiet speculation among those responsible for maintaining succession records. The palace had apparently attempted to resolve these concerns internally through discreet verification processes, but those efforts had encountered resistance and legal threats. Anne's leak effectively bypassed the stalled diplomatic approach, forcing the issue into public discourse where it could no longer be managed through carefully worded statements and strategic silence. The broader implications extended beyond individual relationships. If genetic testing could raise questions about one set of royal children, what prevented similar scrutiny being applied elsewhere? The precedent threatened to transform the monarchy from an institution based on presumed legitimacy into one requiring constant scientific verification. Conservative voices within palace circles worried this would reduce the crown to something mechanical and undignified, while others argued that transparency would actually strengthen public confidence. Anne's action had effectively initiated this debate, whether the institution was prepared for it or not. What emerged in those first chaotic days was a picture of an institution caught between competing imperatives. On one hand, the palace needed to contain damage, protect individuals, and maintain some semblance of operational normalcy. On the other, it faced demands for accountability and clarity that couldn't simply be dismissed or delayed. The leak had created a situation where silence would be interpreted as confirmation and response risked amplifying controversy. Palace communications teams found themselves trapped in an impossible position, knowing that every statement would be dissected and weaponized regardless of its content. Princess Anne herself remained characteristically quiet in the immediate aftermath, offering no public comment or explanation. Those who know her suggest this silence was entirely consistent with her character. Having taken the action she deemed necessary, Anne saw no purpose in justifying or explaining herself through media channels. Her view apparently held that the documents should speak for themselves, that truth required no press conference or carefully staged interview. This approach frustrated both supporters seeking validation and critics demanding accountability, but it reflected Anne's fundamental belief that duty sometimes requires difficult choices made without expectation of public approval or understanding. The origins of the DNA testing operation trace back nearly 2 years before Princess Anne's dramatic disclosure, to a period when concerns about royal lineage verification were being discussed only in the most guarded circumstances. The initiative began not with grand pronouncements or official committees, but through quiet conversations between individuals who understood that certain questions, if left unresolved, could eventually threaten the monarchy's fundamental credibility. These discussions took place in private offices and during walks through palace gardens, always away from staff who might inadvertently mention what they had overheard. Central to these early conversations was a medical consultant whose name never appeared on any official palace roster. This individual had previously worked with the royal household during Queen Elizabeth's final years, handling sensitive health matters that required absolute discretion. The consultant's expertise extended beyond traditional medicine into areas involving forensic analysis and genetic verification, skills that had proven valuable in previous situations requiring confirmation of biological relationships. When approached about conducting tests that would need to remain entirely off the books, the consultant understood immediately what was being requested and why such extraordinary secrecy was necessary. The actual collection of genetic samples happened during what appeared to be routine medical visits. Palace protocol has always included regular health assessments for family members, particularly younger children whose well-being receives constant monitoring. During one such visit, arranged under the pretext of standard developmental checkups, samples were obtained that would serve purposes far beyond their stated medical justification. The process was designed to appear completely unremarkable, involving procedures that any pediatrician might conduct during a normal examination. Nothing in the documentation or scheduling suggested anything unusual was occurring. Transportation of these samples required equally careful planning. Rather than using standard courier services or palace delivery systems that might leave traceable records, the materials were hand-carried by individuals whose connection to the royal household remained deliberately obscure. The samples travelled first to a secure facility in London, where they underwent initial preparation, then were transported to a laboratory located outside the United Kingdom entirely. The choice of an international facility served multiple purposes. It placed the actual analysis beyond the reach of British legal jurisdictions and media scrutiny, while also ensuring that local laboratory staff would have no context for understanding the significance of what they were examining. The laboratory selected for this work had previously handled sensitive paternity cases involving international custody disputes and inheritance claims where accuracy and confidentiality were paramount. Its reputation rested on being able to provide definitive genetic analysis while maintaining absolute discretion about client identities. Samples arrived with code designations rather than names, processed under protocols that prevented any single laboratory employee from accessing complete information about the case. Even the senior scientists conducting the analysis worked with reference numbers and comparison samples labeled only with alphanumeric identifiers. Processing the genetic material took several weeks, during which those who had initiated the testing waited with increasing tension. The individuals who had commissioned this work understood that results might either put long-standing concerns to rest or confirm suspicions that would require extraordinarily difficult decisions. There was no neutral outcome possible. Either the tests would demonstrate clear paternal connections to the direct royal bloodline, or they would reveal discrepancies that would demand some form of institutional response. The implications extended far beyond personal relationships into constitutional territory involving succession rights, titles, and the very definition of legitimate royal status. When the results finally arrived, they were delivered to a senior palace advisor known informally as the Fixer, someone whose role involved managing situations too sensitive for normal administrative channels. This individual had served the monarchy for decades, navigating crises that never reached public awareness through a combination of discretion, strategic thinking, and an absolute commitment to institutional preservation. The Fixer understood immediately that what the laboratory report contained represented one of the most consequential documents to pass through palace hands in generations. The findings raised questions about paternal connections that, if substantiated through additional verification, would require responses that no one wanted to contemplate. According to sources familiar with the report's contents, the genetic analysis indicated patterns that didn't align with expectations based on publicly presented family relationships. The technical language of the document avoided definitive conclusions, as scientific reports typically do, instead presenting probability percentages and statistical confidence levels. However, those trained in interpreting such data could read between the carefully worded findings to understand what was being communicated. The biological connections that should have been clearly evident if certain paternal relationships existed as claimed showed instead markers suggesting alternative possibilities. Word of the test results began circulating through the highest levels of palace administration, though the actual document remained secured in a locked safe accessible to only a handful of individuals. Senior advisors found themselves in an unprecedented situation, possessing information that could potentially reshape royal succession while having no clear protocol for how to proceed. Some argued forcefully that the results should be buried permanently, that the damage from revelation would far exceed any benefit gained from addressing lingering questions about bloodlines. Others insisted that institutional integrity required confronting uncomfortable truths, that building the monarchy's future on foundations of uncertainty was ultimately more dangerous than short-term scandal. These internal debates took on added urgency when intelligence reached the palace that Meghan Markle had somehow learned about the testing operation. Exactly how this information leaked remains unclear, though speculation focused on staff members who might have observed unusual activities or overheard fragments of conversations. Meghan's response demonstrated both the seriousness with which she viewed the situation and her willingness to fight aggressively against what she perceived as an attack on her family. Her legal team immediately issued warnings threatening action against anyone involved in what they characterized as an unauthorized invasion of privacy involving minor children. The legal letters that Meghan's attorneys sent to various palace officials carried unmistakable threats. They cited privacy laws, medical confidentiality regulations, and protections specifically designed to shield children from exploitation and intrusion. The warnings made clear that any attempt to publicize or even discuss the genetic testing would be met with immediate court filings seeking injunctions, damages, and criminal prosecution where applicable. The tone conveyed not just professional legal positioning, but personal fury at what Meghan viewed as a coordinated campaign to delegitimize her children and destroy the family she had built with Harry. Palace administrators found themselves caught between competing legal and ethical obligations. On one side stood concerns about royal succession and the institutional need for clarity about bloodlines. On the other stood genuine questions about whether genetic testing conducted without explicit parental consent, particularly involving children, could be legally or morally justified regardless of the circumstances. Some senior advisors worried that even if the palace's intentions were focused on institutional preservation, the methods employed would appear indefensible if subjected to public scrutiny or judicial review. King Charles became increasingly involved in these discussions as the situation escalated. According to insiders, Charles struggled deeply with the competing demands placed upon him. As a father, he wanted to protect Harry and avoid actions that would deepen the already painful estrangement between them. As monarch, he faced responsibilities to ensure the succession remained clear and uncontested. Charles reportedly spent long hours reviewing historical precedents, searching for examples of how previous monarchs had navigated similar dilemmas involving questions of legitimacy and bloodline verification. The weight of these decisions was visible to those around him, manifesting in sleepless nights and an unusual irritability during routine meetings. Prince William's involvement in these private discussions took a notably different tone from his father's approach. While Charles appeared torn between emotional and institutional considerations, William focused more narrowly on what he viewed as necessary measures to protect the monarchy's future. Sources suggest William argued that sentiment couldn't be allowed to override constitutional requirements, that the institution had survived for centuries precisely because difficult decisions were made when circumstances demanded them. His position emphasized that protecting George, Charlotte, and Louis meant ensuring they would inherit a monarchy with clear foundations rather than one compromised by unresolved questions about who legitimately belonged within the succession. Princess Anne's name began appearing more frequently in these confidential discussions. Staff noted that she attended meetings where the DNA results were being debated, listening carefully but saying relatively little. Those who knew her well recognized this pattern as characteristic of how Anne processed complex situations, absorbing information and perspectives before forming her own conclusions. What few realized during this period was that Anne had already decided the truth needed to emerge publicly. She was simply determining the best method and timing for making that happen. The internal debate about how to handle the DNA results dragged on for months, with no clear resolution emerging. Each meeting seemed to generate more questions than answers. If the results were made public, how should they be framed? What explanations could be offered for why testing had been conducted in the first place? How would the palace respond to inevitable accusations of racism and institutional cruelty? Conversely, if the results remained concealed, how long before they leaked through other channels? Could the monarchy afford to have this information emerge in some uncontrolled fashion years in the future when circumstances might be even less favourable? During this period of internal paralysis, Meghan continued pressing her case through multiple channels. She reportedly sought private audiences with Charles, attempting to persuade him that pursuing questions about her children's paternity represented a betrayal that would poison any possibility of future family reconciliation. She emphasized the trauma that public speculation would inflict on Archie and Lilibet, arguing that protecting children should take precedence over institutional anxieties. Some palace insiders found her arguments compelling, noting that whatever questions existed about bloodlines, two innocent children would ultimately bear the consequences of adult decisions and conflicts. The tension finally reached a breaking point during a particularly contentious meeting that brought together Charles, William, Camilla, Anne, and several senior advisors. The gathering had been called to make a final decision about whether the DNA results would be addressed publicly in some fashion or buried permanently. According to accounts from those present, the discussion grew heated as different factions pressed their positions. It was during this meeting that a trusted advisor made a fateful decision, approaching Princess Anne privately afterward and handing her a sealed copy of the complete DNA report along with a note containing just 7 words that would change everything. The transformation from palace secret to global headline happened with stunning velocity. What had been contained within the most restricted circles of royal administration suddenly became accessible to millions of people across every continent. The first media outlet to receive the encrypted files spent several hours verifying their authenticity before proceeding, understanding that publishing unconfirmed allegations about royal paternity could result in devastating legal consequences. However, once forensic analysis confirmed the documents had indeed originated from palace servers and bore the digital signatures of legitimate royal household systems, the decision to proceed became inevitable. By the time dawn broke over London, the story had already circulated through international news networks, social media platforms, and every major publication with even peripheral interest in royal affairs. Headlines varied in their specific phrasing, but the core message remained consistent across different outlets. Genetic testing had been conducted regarding members of the royal family. Questions had been raised about paternal connections, and the information had been leaked by someone with access to the highest levels of palace security. The speed with which the story proliferated made any hope of containment impossible from the very beginning. Public reaction divided along predictable lines, though the intensity of feeling on both sides exceeded what even seasoned royal watchers had anticipated. Supporters of Harry and Meghan viewed the leak as confirmation of the institutional racism and cruelty they had long claimed characterized the palace's treatment of the couple. They emphasized the violation of privacy involving children who had no ability to consent to genetic testing or defend themselves against public speculation about their legitimacy. Online campaigns emerged immediately, using hashtags that trended globally within hours, demanding accountability for what was characterized as a coordinated attack motivated by prejudice rather than genuine institutional concerns. Conversely, those who prioritized monarchical tradition and constitutional clarity saw the leak differently. From their perspective, questions about bloodline verification weren't rooted in personal animus, but in legitimate institutional requirements. The monarchy's entire foundation rested on hereditary succession, which, by definition, required certainty about biological relationships. If that certainty didn't exist, or if verification had been actively resisted, then addressing those gaps became an obligation rather than an attack. This viewpoint emphasized that titles, privileges, and positions within the succession carried weight precisely because they reflected confirmed lineage, not assumptions or public presentations that might or might not align with biological reality. Media coverage quickly evolved beyond simple reporting of the leak's existence into detailed analysis of its implications. Constitutional experts were interviewed extensively, explaining the technical requirements for succession eligibility and how questions about paternity might affect title claims. Legal analysts debated whether the genetic testing had violated privacy laws or medical confidentiality regulations, with opinions varying significantly based on jurisdiction and interpretation. Royal historians provided context by examining previous instances where legitimacy questions had arisen, though most acknowledged that modern circumstances presented unique complications that historical precedents couldn't fully address. Inside Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere shifted from shock to crisis management mode. Communications teams worked around the clock developing response strategies, though the fundamental challenge remained extraordinarily difficult. Any statement that acknowledged the testing's validity would effectively confirm the questions being raised about paternity. However, denying the document's authenticity seemed impossible given the forensic evidence confirming their origin from palace systems. The eventual official statement attempted to navigate this impossible situation by emphasizing the royal family's commitment to privacy and dignity, while neither confirming nor denying specific allegations. The carefully parsed language satisfied no one, being interpreted by critics as evasive and by supporters as inadequately defensive. King Charles found himself managing multiple crises simultaneously. Beyond the immediate public relations disaster, he faced urgent questions about internal security. How had Princess Anne obtained access to materials that should have been restricted to a tiny circle of senior administrators? Had she acted alone, or had others within the palace hierarchy assisted her? The security review launched in response examined not just technical systems but human relationships, attempting to trace exactly how the leak had occurred and whether additional sensitive information might be vulnerable to similar breaches. The investigation's findings would remain confidential, but its very existence signaled the depth of concern about institutional security. Prince William's response to the crisis combined public composure with private fury. Those close to him reported that William viewed the leak as catastrophic for the monarchy's carefully maintained image, regardless of whatever legitimate concerns about succession might have motivated it. During his next scheduled public appearance, William spoke briefly about family unity and the importance of allowing private matters to remain private, but his body language conveyed tension that contradicted his measured words. Royal watchers noted the tightness around his eyes and the clipped precision of his speech, interpreting these signs as evidence of barely contained anger about how the situation had spiraled beyond any possibility of controlled resolution. The response from Harry and Meghan's legal team demonstrated the couple's determination to fight back aggressively against what they characterized as an orchestrated campaign of destruction. Within 24 hours of the leak's publication, cease and desist letters were dispatched to major media outlets across multiple jurisdictions. The letters demanded immediate removal of all content related to the DNA testing, threatening substantial damages for invasion of privacy, defamation, and violation of protections specifically designed to shield children from harmful publicity. Some outlets complied, removing articles and social media posts. Others refused, arguing that the information had already entered the public domain and that reporting on matters of legitimate public interest regarding royal succession couldn't be suppressed through legal intimidation. The legal counteroffensive extended beyond simple demands for content removal. Meghan's attorneys filed preliminary injunctions in both British and American courts, seeking to prevent further dissemination of the DNA report and to compel identification of everyone involved in its unauthorized release. The filings characterized the testing as having been conducted without proper consent and the leak as a malicious act intended to harm children too young to defend themselves. Legal experts who reviewed these filings noted their aggressive tone and ambitious scope, though many questioned whether the claims could ultimately succeed given the jurisdictional complexities and public interest considerations involved. Social media became a particularly intense battleground where the controversy played out in real time. Supporters of different positions marshaled evidence, arguments, and emotional appeals in efforts to sway public opinion. Hashtags supporting both Harry and Meghan and those defending the palace's right to verify succession claims generated millions of posts within days. The platforms themselves faced difficult moderation decisions, needing to balance free expression against their policies prohibiting harassment and misinformation. Some content was removed for violating community standards, though these decisions inevitably generated accusations of bias from whichever side felt disadvantaged. The controversy's impact extended beyond immediate parties into broader discussions about the monarchy's role in contemporary society. Critics who had long questioned whether hereditary monarchy remained appropriate in the 21st century used the scandal as evidence of the institution's fundamental absurdity. They argued that genetic testing to determine who deserved titles and privileges exemplified exactly why monarchical systems should be replaced with meritocratic alternatives. Defenders countered that the controversy actually demonstrated the monarchy's commitment to maintaining standards and refusing to compromise foundational principles, even when doing so generated controversy. Behind the scenes, palace administrators scrambled to assess broader damage and develop longer-term strategies for managing the fallout. Private polling was commissioned to gauge public sentiment and identify which messages might prove most effective in rebuilding confidence. Focus groups were conducted to test different narrative approaches, though results proved frustratingly mixed. Some segments of the population viewed the entire controversy as much ado about nothing, archaic concerns that shouldn't matter in modern times. Others took the questions about bloodline verification extremely seriously, viewing them as fundamental to whether the monarchy retained legitimacy. Princess Anne's role in precipitating the crisis became a subject of intense fascination and speculation. Why had someone known for absolute discretion suddenly taken such a dramatic and destructive action? Theories proliferated, ranging from suggestions that Anne had acted out of personal animosity toward Meghan, to claims that she had been motivated by pure institutional loyalty and saw no other way to force necessary conversations. Those who knew Anne well insisted the latter explanation made more sense, given her character and history. But the lack of any public statement from the Princess Royal herself left room for endless interpretation and debate. The international dimension of the controversy created additional complications. American media coverage tended to frame the story more sympathetically toward Harry and Meghan, emphasizing privacy violations and questioning whether racial bias had motivated the scrutiny. British coverage proved more divided, with some outlets defending the palace's institutional prerogatives, while others criticized what they viewed as cruel treatment of a couple who had already suffered enormous pressure. Commonwealth nations watched with particular interest, recognizing that questions about the monarchy's legitimacy and practices had direct implications for their own relationships with the crown. As days stretched into weeks, the story refused to fade from headlines despite palace hopes that public attention would eventually shift to other matters. Each new development, whether a court filing, a leaked internal memo, or a statement from someone claiming inside knowledge, reignited coverage and commentary. The sustained intensity of interest demonstrated that the controversy had touched something deeper than simple curiosity about royal gossip. It had opened fundamental questions about heredity, privilege, institutional power, and how societies should navigate tensions between tradition and contemporary values. The emotional toll on family relationships became increasingly apparent even through carefully managed public appearances. When William and Charles appeared together at official functions, observers noted a stiffness in their interactions that hadn't been present previously. The easy rapport that had characterized their relationship seemed strained under the weight of managing a crisis that touched on succession, legitimacy, and the monarchy's future. Meanwhile, the complete absence of any communication between the British-based royals and Harry's California household spoke volumes about how completely the scandal had severed already damaged relationships. The discovery of Queen Elizabeth's letter added an entirely new dimension to an already explosive situation. The document had been stored in a private drawer within the late monarch's personal study, a space that had remained largely untouched since her passing. Princess Anne had been granted access to sort through her mother's private papers, a task she had approached with appropriate reverence and caution. Among the personal correspondence, family photographs, and administrative notes, Anne discovered an envelope bearing her own name in the Queen's distinctive handwriting. The letter inside was dated several years before Elizabeth's death, suggesting the monarch had contemplated these very issues long before they erupted into public crisis. The content of Queen Elizabeth's letter demonstrated a prescience that even those closest to her found remarkable. She had written about her growing concerns regarding the verification of royal lineages, particularly as the family expanded and circumstances became less traditional. The Queen's words reflected deep thought about how the monarchy might navigate situations where questions arose about biological connections to the succession line. Her language was characteristically measured and diplomatic, but the underlying message was unmistakable. Elizabeth believed that if serious doubts ever emerged about bloodline legitimacy, the institution's survival would depend on addressing those doubts directly, rather than hoping silence would make them disappear. Most striking was the Queen's inclusion of specific guidance for how such a situation should be handled. She had outlined a framework that prioritized institutional stability while attempting to minimize personal harm. The approach involved quiet verification through proper channels, followed by dignified adjustments to titles and roles if testing revealed discrepancies from publicly presented relationships. Elizabeth had written that the monarchy's strength came from its connection to historical continuity, and that continuity required certainty about hereditary succession. She acknowledged the pain such revelations might cause, but argued that short-term discomfort was preferable to long-term institutional decay built on foundations of uncertainty. The Queen's letter also contained passages that seemed to reference Meghan specifically, though without using her name directly. Elizabeth wrote about the challenges of integrating individuals from very different backgrounds into royal life and the importance of ensuring that such integration didn't compromise fundamental monarchical principles. She expressed sympathy for those who found royal protocols restrictive and outdated, but maintained that certain traditions existed not merely as customs, but as essential structural elements. The careful phrasing suggested Elizabeth had spent considerable time thinking about how to balance compassion for individuals against responsibilities to an institution spanning centuries. When Princess Anne made the decision to reveal the existence of this letter, she understood it would fundamentally shift the controversy's dynamics. The leak of DNA results could be characterized as a rogue action by a disgruntled family member. However, a letter from Queen Elizabeth herself outlining concerns and providing guidance for exactly this type of situation gave Anne's actions a very different context. It suggested that what she had done aligned with the late monarch's own thinking, and possibly even her explicit wishes. The revelation transformed Anne from apparent rebel into potential executor of the Queen's final instructions regarding institutional preservation. The impact on Meghan was reportedly devastating. According to sources close to the California household, learning that Queen Elizabeth had harbored doubts about succession questions involving her children struck at the foundation of everything Meghan had believed about her relationship with the royal family. She had frequently spoken about her respect for the Queen and her efforts to honor royal traditions, even while advocating for modernization. The discovery that Elizabeth had been quietly concerned about bloodline verification suggested that Meghan's acceptance within the institution had been more conditional than she had understood. Friends described her as alternating between grief and rage, feeling betrayed by someone she had genuinely admired and tried to please. Harry's reaction proved equally profound. His grandmother had represented a stabilizing force throughout his life, someone who offered unconditional love even when he struggled with royal expectations. Learning that Elizabeth had written a letter contemplating scenarios where his children might need to be distanced from the succession hit him with tremendous force. Associates reported that Harry withdrew even further from public engagement, spending long hours alone processing the implications of what his grandmother's words meant for his family's future. The pain was compounded by the realization that he would never have the opportunity to discuss these matters with Elizabeth directly, to understand her reasoning, or perhaps even change her perspective. Prince William found in the Queen's letter something he desperately needed: moral authority for difficult decisions ahead. The guidance Elizabeth had provided gave William confidence that steering the monarchy toward clarity about succession wasn't cruel or reactionary, but aligned with his grandmother's own assessment of institutional requirements. In private meetings with advisors, William reportedly referenced the letter frequently, using it as justification for policies that would emphasize verified bloodlines in determining titles and privileges. The Queen's words provided cover for actions that might otherwise have been characterized as personally motivated attacks on Harry and Meghan. The public reaction to the letter's revelation proved complex and divided. Some viewed it as vindication of concerns about succession verification, evidence that even the beloved Queen Elizabeth had recognized potential problems requiring attention. Others saw it as a sad testament to institutional rigidity, suggesting that even the most respected monarch in modern history hadn't been able to transcend outdated concerns about bloodline purity. Debates erupted about whether Elizabeth's guidance should be followed as sacred instructions or critically examined as reflections of generational attitudes that contemporary society should move beyond. The letter's existence fundamentally altered calculations about the monarchy's path forward, providing a framework that palace administrators could reference when making decisions about titles, roles, and succession planning, while William prepared to use his grandmother's wisdom as the foundation for a reign that would emphasize tradition and verified legitimacy above all else.